I lost my mom. My mama didn't even see me graduate at all. Did not see me graduate. Can't help me through life anymore. Can't guide me. I'm 19. I'm lost as hell. Like, I'm so lost. I don't know what to do.
The world came to a stop on March 16th, 2024, when her mom was reported missing, then found dead 2 days later. A gunshot wound to the back of her head, execution style.
A human at the end of the day, and she did the same job y'all do. And I wish I cared a little bit more, just as y'all care for Mr. Justin that lost his life as well. Nobody cares like I do. And I can't do anything, nothing, but talk and talk and talk and try to get her name out there, try to let people know that my baby is still, she was still a human at the end of the day, and they took her from me in the worst way possible. I left her abandoned to rot. How can somebody do that to another human being?
At 5:04 on the morning of March 15th, 2024, New Mexico State Police Officer Justin Hare pulled in behind a white BMW stranded along Interstate 40 near Tucumcari. The car had a flat tire. The man beside it appeared to need help. It looked like the kind of roadside call officers handle every day. Justin spoke with the driver, learned that nearby repair businesses were closed, and offered him a ride. That act of service would become the final call of his life. Because the man standing at Justin's passenger window was not simply a stranded motorist. His name was Jaremy Alexander Smith. The BMW did not belong to him. It belonged to Phonesia Machado-Fore, a 52-year-old South Carolina paramedic whose husband had already reported her missing. The handgun Smith was carrying did not belong to him either. Authorities say it had been stolen from Phonesia's home. And within seconds of Justin offering him transportation, Smith allegedly raised that weapon and fired through the passenger side of the patrol vehicle. Justin had stopped to help a stranger. But the stranger had arrived in New Mexico at the end of a journey that began more than 1,500 miles away, inside the home of a wife, mother, and grandmother who had suddenly stopped answering her phone. Back in South Carolina, Phonesia's family was searching for her. They knew her BMW was gone. They knew her silence was completely out of character. What they did not yet know was who had taken the vehicle, how far it had traveled, or what had happened before it left the state. Smith had not made the entire journey alone. Another recently released prisoner had traveled west with him, believing Smith's claim that the BMW belonged to him. But by the time they reached Texas, that man said Smith had threatened to kill him. He refused to go any farther. Smith continued toward Albuquerque alone. Then the BMW's tire failed, and the officer who stopped beside it became the second victim connected to the same vehicle. How did Smith gain access to Phonesia's home? Why was she reportedly taken while still dressed for bed? What happened before her body was found near an abandoned property? And how did the disappearance of a South Carolina paramedic become tied to the murder of a police officer in New Mexico? Before we go back to where this began, tell us what state or country you are watching from. Subscribe to Dark Trace Crime Stories for deeply researched cases told with respect for the victims. Because the white BMW beside that highway was not just a stolen car. It was the first visible link between two families who were about to receive devastating news. Phonesia Machado-Fore was 52. She had built a life around service, family, and responsibility. She worked as an experienced paramedic with Florence County Emergency Medical Services, answering calls from people facing some of the worst moments of their lives. Her colleagues remembered her as strong, outspoken, demanding, and deeply committed to helping younger paramedics improve. She was not the kind of person who stood back when someone needed guidance. Phonesia served in the Army or the Air Force. She later earned a master's degree in hospital administration from the University of Phoenix, adding another achievement to a life already devoted to caring for others. Phonesia was a wife, mother, and grandmother. She had been married to Bobby Tyrone for approximately 22 years. Together, they raised two daughters, Roxy Curry and Faith Fore. She was preparing for more time with her family, not less. The final words she and Tyrone exchanged were words of love. Faith's last memory of her mother was a visit to school and a hug. Phonesia would not live to see her graduate. This was a woman who spent years responding when strangers were in danger. Yet when danger entered her own home, she apparently had no chance to call for the help she had given so many others. And the man accused of destroying those plans was not her boyfriend or husband. His connection to Phonesia was indirect, which makes what came next even harder to understand.
Phonesia Machado-Fore's daughter, who lives in Marion, remembers her mom as opinionated, yet incredibly dedicated to saving lives.
Is that her singing?
Yes. Like that was how she was.
Jaremy Alexander Smith did not enter Phonesia Machado-Fore's life as a boyfriend, husband, or former partner. Investigators later learned that he had been seeing one of the women who shared Phonesia's home. That relationship appears to have been the connection that gave him access to the residence and placed him close enough to Phonesia for their paths to cross. Her family initially said they did not recognize him. They knew of no personal relationship between Smith and Phonesia, but he was not a man without a documented history. Smith had previously been convicted of attempted armed robbery. While incarcerated, he was also convicted of taking a hostage. He spent approximately 8 years in prison, and the records from those years described repeated acts of violence and misconduct. His institutional history included possession of weapons, attacks or attempted attacks against other inmates, and assaults or attempted assaults involving correctional employees. This was not a record built around one isolated incident. It was a long pattern of weapons, threats, and violence inside an environment where he was already being closely monitored. Smith was released from prison in December 2023. He remained under supervision, but only about 3 months separated his release from the deaths of Phonesia and Officer Justin Hare. And even before March 2024, he had already established a connection outside South Carolina. Federal sentencing records later revealed that Smith had met a woman from New Mexico online while he was still incarcerated. After his release, he traveled to visit her in Albuquerque. That detail would become important because when Smith later left South Carolina in Phonesia's BMW, he was not simply driving without direction. Albuquerque appears to have been a destination he already knew. But one question remained difficult to ignore. How did a recently released man with such an extensive record gain enough access to a shared home to allegedly abduct one of its residents, return to the property, and remove several firearms? By the second week of March 2024, Phonesia suddenly stopped answering her phone, and her family knew immediately that something was wrong. She stayed in contact. She answered her phone. If she was busy, she called back. So when the calls began going unanswered, her daughters did not dismiss it as ordinary silence. Early missing person reports said Phonesia had last been seen around March 12th. Soon after, messages went unanswered, calls were not returned, and no one could give her family a clear explanation of where she had gone. That was when concern turned into fear. Her daughters knew their mother was preparing for a move. She had plans, responsibilities, and family waiting for her. Simply disappearing without a word did not fit the woman they knew. On March 14th, her husband, Tyrone Fore, reported her missing to the Marion County Sheriff's Office. What began as one family trying to locate a wife and mother quickly spread across several jurisdictions. Phonesia lived in Marion County, but investigators had to consider where she might have traveled, where her vehicle had gone, and whether any activity linked to her phone could reveal her last movements. Authorities began examining her telephone information and searching for the white BMW registered in her name. At that stage, her family did not know what they were dealing with. Had she left home unexpectedly? Had she suffered a medical emergency? Had there been an accident? Or had someone prevented her from answering? There was also a gap in the dates that remained important. Initial reports said Phonesia was last seen around March 12th. However, a later federal indictment alleged that Jaremy Smith entered her home and kidnapped her on March 13th. Her family was calling hospitals, law enforcement agencies, and anyone who might have seen her. Prosecutors alleged that Phonesia had already been taken from her own home. For days, Phonesia's family had been trying to understand why she had suddenly gone silent. The federal case filed nearly 2 years later presented a far more disturbing explanation. According to the February 2026 indictment, Jaremy Smith entered Phonesia's home in Marion on March 13, 2024. Prosecutors alleged that he kidnapped her and forced her into her own white BMW. Phonesia was not leaving for work. She was not beginning her planned move to Minnesota. And investigators do not believe she went willingly. The indictment alleges that Smith made Phonesia drive away from the home and travel toward a remote area near Nichols, South Carolina. Once they reached the location, prosecutors say she was restrained and blindfolded. She was then taken behind an abandoned house. There, according to the federal government, Smith shot her in the back of the head. The clothing later found on Phonesia made the alleged abduction even more disturbing. She was reportedly still dressed in sleep clothes. She was also wearing house slippers. Those details suggest that whatever happened inside the residence unfolded quickly. Phonesia may not have been given time to dress, prepare to leave, contact her family, or alert anyone that she was in danger. A woman who had spent years responding to medical emergencies was allegedly removed from her own home before she could call for help herself. The evidence found with her body also supported investigators' belief that she had been forcibly controlled and transported while still alive. Prosecutors say she had been restrained before being taken to the abandoned property, far from the home where her family expected her to be. Smith has pleaded not guilty in the South Carolina federal case. No jury has yet decided whether the government has proved these allegations beyond a reasonable doubt. However, federal prosecutors have made clear how seriously they view the evidence. In February 2026, the United States Department of Justice formally announced that it intends to seek the death penalty on eligible charges connected to Phonesia's kidnapping, carjacking, and killing. For her family, that legal decision came nearly 2 years after they first began calling her phone and receiving no answer. But the condition in which Phonesia was eventually found would reveal even more about what she had allegedly endured before her death. At approximately 6:15 p.m. on March 15, 2024, the search for Phonesia Machado-Fore reached a devastating end. Her body was discovered near an abandoned property on Jones Drive, in the Lakeview area of Dillon County. The location was rural and isolated, far removed from the home where her family had expected to find her. By then, they had spent days calling, searching, and waiting for any sign that she was safe. What investigators found at the property told a very different story. Phonesia was reportedly still wearing sleep clothes and house slippers. A dog restraint collar had been placed around her neck. Cut zip ties were found near her body, and material had been wrapped around part of her face. There was also evidence that her wrists had been restrained. Those details mattered because they indicated that she had not simply been left at the property after her death. Investigators believed she had been controlled, bound, and transported while she was still alive. Phonesia had suffered a gunshot wound to the head. The coroner later confirmed that the wound caused her death. For her family, the discovery ended the hope that Phonesia might still walk back through the door. But it also opened a much larger question. By the time investigators found her on Jones Drive, her white BMW was already hundreds of miles away, and prosecutors alleged that the man driving it had returned to the very home from which she had been taken. According to prosecutors, Jaremy Smith did not leave South Carolina immediately after Phonesia was killed. He allegedly drove her white BMW back to the residence where she had been taken. Then he went inside again. This time, prosecutors say, he removed several firearms from the home. Among them was a Taurus 9mm handgun belonging to one of Phonesia's roommates. That weapon would later become a crucial part of the case because authorities say it was the same gun used to shoot New Mexico State Police Officer Justin Hare. Smith was not alone during part of what followed. An associate, who had recently been released from jail, later told investigators that Smith offered him a ride. Smith claimed the BMW belonged to him, giving the associate no immediate reason to believe he was traveling in a missing woman's vehicle. According to the associate's account, he and Smith removed 6 firearms and later sold them for approximately $1,500. Investigators recovered those guns on March 17th. The associate initially agreed to travel west with Smith. Their route took them from South Carolina through Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Texas. But the further they traveled, the more dangerous the situation became. The associate said Smith began threatening him. At one point, Smith allegedly told him he would kill him. By the time they stopped in Texas, the associate had heard enough. He refused to continue the journey and separated from Smith. Smith drove on alone. That decision may have saved the associate's life. It also left Smith in sole control of Phonesia's BMW, with at least one stolen firearm still in his possession, as he continued toward New Mexico. And this is where the questions surrounding his release become difficult to ignore. Smith had been out of prison for only a few months. Yet his record already included years of violence, weapons violations, assaults and hostage-taking while incarcerated. Do you believe his post-release supervision adequately reflected the danger documented in that history? Tell us what you think in the comments. After the associate walked away in Texas, Smith continued toward Albuquerque by himself. He had Phonesia's car. He had a stolen handgun. And then, somewhere along Interstate 40, the BMW developed a flat tire. Officer Justin Christopher Hare was born in Albuquerque on January 31, 1989, and raised in New Mexico. He earned his GED through Moriarty High School in 2007 before continuing his education at Central New Mexico Community College and Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. Service had always been part of his life. Before joining the New Mexico State Police, Justin worked as a volunteer firefighter. He also coached soccer, took part in community outreach, and gave his time to people who needed support. Outside work, he enjoyed hunting, fishing, and aviation. Justin joined the New Mexico State Police in 2018 and had served for approximately 5 years by March 2024. He was also the treasurer of the New Mexico State Police Association and a member of the Fraternal Order of Police. At home, he shared his life with his partner, Dizer Quintana, and their daughters, Julianne and Cadence. Dizer was pregnant with their third daughter when Justin was killed. That child would be born months later, entering the world without ever meeting her father. Justin was also deeply loved by his parents, Jim and Terry Hare, and his brother Brandon. The people closest to him remembered someone who did not ignore a person in need. He stopped. He offered help. And on the morning of March 15, 2024, that instinct brought him alongside a disabled white BMW on Interstate 40. The man beside it appeared stranded. Justin had no way of knowing that the vehicle belonged to Phonesia Machado-Fore, or that the driver was carrying a gun stolen from her home. Before 5:04 that morning, Jaremy Smith was stranded along Interstate 40 near Tucumcari. The white BMW he was driving had a flat tire. With no repair shop open at that hour, Smith reportedly tried to attract the attention of passing motorists. Then New Mexico State Police Officer Justin Hare arrived. He pulled in behind the BMW and approached the situation as what it appeared to be, a driver in need of roadside assistance. Smith walked toward the passenger side of Justin's patrol vehicle. The two discussed the damaged tire, and Justin explained that nearby businesses were closed. He then offered Smith a ride. That offer matters because Justin was not confronting him. He was not attempting to arrest him. He had stopped because he believed a motorist needed help. Justin directed Smith to move toward the front of the patrol vehicle. Then, within seconds, the encounter changed completely. Authorities say Smith produced the Taurus 9mm handgun taken from Phonesia Machado-Fore's home and fired through the passenger side of the patrol car. Justin was struck while still seated behind the wheel. Smith then moved around the vehicle toward the driver's side. Court reporting based on video from the patrol car states that Smith paused as traffic passed along the interstate. Once the roadway cleared, he fired additional shots through the driver's side. There was no prolonged argument. No traffic stop had escalated. No officer had chased Smith down the highway. Justin had simply arrived, asked about the flat tire, and offered transportation to a stranded stranger. But the stranger beside his patrol car was standing next to a vehicle registered to a missing South Carolina paramedic. The gun in his hand had come from her residence. And more than 1,500 miles away, Phonesia's family was still trying to understand why she had stopped answering her phone. By this point, two separate stories had collided on the side of one highway. One involved a woman who had spent years answering emergency calls. The other involved an officer who had stopped to assist someone he believed needed help. The connection between them was the man driving Phonesia's BMW. But the attack did not end after Justin was shot. Smith then took control of the police vehicle, with the wounded officer still inside. After the attack, Jaremy Smith forced his way into control of the patrol vehicle. Justin Hare was still inside. Authorities say Smith pushed or repositioned the wounded officer away from the driver's seat and toward the passenger side. He then pulled away from the roadside and began driving west along Interstate 40. Justin's body camera continued recording. The audio reportedly captured him struggling to breathe as the patrol car moved farther from the place where he had originally stopped to help. Inside the vehicle, the distress system was activated. That alert reached dispatch, but the officers responding did not yet know the full extent of what had happened. They knew Justin's patrol unit was moving under unusual circumstances. They knew something was wrong. What they did not know was who was driving, or that Justin had already been critically wounded. Smith eventually left the interstate and turned onto a frontage road. There, authorities say, he pulled Justin from the patrol vehicle and abandoned him beside the roadway. Then he drove away again. For approximately 10 more minutes, Smith continued west in the stolen police vehicle, while Justin remained alone and severely injured. The patrol car did not travel much farther. Smith eventually lost control and crashed it into vegetation away from the main roadway. When another officer located the abandoned vehicle, Justin was not inside. That discovery immediately changed the search. Officers began checking the nearby roads and surrounding area, trying to determine where he had been left. Justin was eventually found alive beside the frontage road. He was in critical condition. Emergency personnel rushed him to Trigg Memorial Hospital, but the injuries were too severe. At approximately 7:21 that morning, Justin Hare was pronounced dead. He was 35 years old. A little more than 2 hours had passed since he first arrived beside the disabled BMW. In that brief period, a roadside call had become a search for a stolen patrol vehicle, a wounded officer, and an armed man moving west across New Mexico. Smith had now lost Phonesia's BMW. He had also lost Justin's patrol vehicle. But he was still moving.
Six taking care of B97. Hey, bud.
Got a flat tire. You can help me?
What are you needing?
Just a tire. I need a ride to the store. You get me there.
Okay, I can get you back to town real quick, but nobody's open tonight.
Well, that's fine. I get to town. I just come back to get the car.
Okay, go ahead and go to the front of my car real quick. I'll meet you up there real quick.
All right.
I'll get.
After crashing Justin Hare's patrol vehicle, Jaremy Smith left it behind and continued on foot. He was now stranded again, but this time, law enforcement across New Mexico was searching for him. Authorities believed he was armed. His description was circulated, businesses were placed on alert, and members of the public were warned not to approach him. Smith eventually reached the Cuervo area, where investigators say he stole a flatbed truck and continued west toward Albuquerque. By then, the pieces of the case were beginning to connect. The white BMW abandoned along Interstate 40 was registered to Phonesia Machado-Fore, the missing South Carolina paramedic whose body had been found hours later. The man wanted for Justin's killing had allegedly been driving her vehicle, and the weapon used during the roadside attack had also come from her home. For 2 days, Smith remained at large. Then, on March 17th, he entered a gas station in the Albuquerque area. An employee asked to see his identification. When she looked at the name, the unusual spelling of Jaremy caught her attention. She had seen the alerts. She compared the man standing in front of her with the person authorities were searching for and became convinced they were the same person. But she did not challenge him. She stayed calm, kept her distance, and quietly contacted law enforcement. When deputies arrived, Smith ran. The chase moved through a residential area, where authorities say Smith was still carrying the handgun linked to Justin's killing. During the armed encounter that followed, Smith was wounded and taken into custody. Officers later recovered the pistol after he discarded it while trying to escape. The 2-day search was over, and once investigators had Smith, Phonesia's BMW, and the weapon, 2 cases that had begun on opposite sides of the country became part of the same evidentiary trail.
So when we found out he was gone, I went home and I told Jim we've got to do something to keep him alive.
Terry and James Hare holding back tears as they talk about their son.
That was his world. He loved the kids.
Yeah, he'd do anything.
He was a soccer coach. He was a baseball coach. He did everything he could for the kids.
Terry wearing her son's badge number on her earrings, and inside her purse, a bag full of these pins.
And so we pulled out the pins, and I ordered more pins, and I made labels, and I stuck the labels on them that have his name
and end of watch.
That end of watch, March 15th, 2024, a day neither of them will forget.
He was such a caring and loving person.
Happy
Happy
person.
He saw good in everything.
Once Jaremy Smith was in custody, investigators could finally lay the evidence from both states side by side. The first major link was the white BMW. Its registration led directly to Phonesia Machado-Fore, whose husband had already reported her missing in South Carolina. Information connected to the vehicle, along with telephone and GPS records, helped authorities trace its movement away from Marion and across several states. Then there was the gun. The Taurus 9mm recovered after Smith's arrest had been taken from one of Phonesia's roommates. Authorities linked that same weapon to the attack on Officer Justin Hare. Investigators also recovered and traced the other firearms allegedly removed from Phonesia's residence and sold after the burglary. Those weapons supported the associate's account of what happened before he and Smith left South Carolina. That associate provided another crucial connection. He told investigators that Smith had claimed the BMW belonged to him, that they traveled west together, and that he abandoned the trip in Texas after Smith threatened to kill him. The vehicles completed the route. Phonesia's BMW was found disabled in New Mexico. Justin's stolen patrol vehicle was discovered after Smith crashed it. The flatbed truck allegedly taken in Cuervo showed how Smith continued toward Albuquerque after leaving the patrol car behind. Video and audio from Justin's patrol vehicle documented the roadside encounter and the movements that followed. Smith's previous connection to an Albuquerque woman helped explain why he had been traveling in that direction. Finally, the gas station employee's identification brought the search to an end. Together, the evidence allowed authorities to trace a path beginning at Phonesia's home in South Carolina and ending with Smith's capture near Albuquerque. That path produced two separate prosecutions, one already ending in life without parole, and another in which federal prosecutors are seeking the death penalty. In April 2024, a federal grand jury in New Mexico charged Jaremy Smith in a 6-count indictment connected to Officer Justin Hare's death. The charges included carjacking resulting in death, causing death by discharging a firearm during a crime of violence, kidnapping resulting in death, possession of a firearm by a prohibited felon, possession of a stolen firearm, and transporting a stolen vehicle across state lines. Smith initially pleaded not guilty, but on January 17, 2025, he changed his plea and admitted guilt to 5 federal counts under an agreement with prosecutors. Those counts covered the carjacking, firearm offense, kidnapping, prohibited possession, and possession of a stolen weapon. The interstate transport charge was not among the 5 counts included in the plea. Under that agreement, Smith accepted life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. This was not a sentence that could later be reduced to a few decades. The convictions carried a mandatory life term. On April 21, 2025, Smith appeared before U.S. District Judge James O. Browning. Members of Justin's family were present as the court imposed life in federal prison. The Department of Justice made the consequence clear. There is no parole in the federal system. Whatever happens in the separate South Carolina proceedings, Smith will never be released from the sentence imposed for the federal crimes connected to Justin's murder. For Justin's family, the judgment provided legal certainty. Smith had admitted his guilt, and he would never return to the public. But for Phonesia Machado-Fore's husband and daughters, the New Mexico sentence did not complete their fight for justice. It punished Smith for the crimes surrounding Justin's death. It did not resolve Phonesia's case.
Jaremy Smith faces 17 state charges related to the killing of Machado-Fore. Fore says she hasn't received any answers from officials since January. In fact, she never knew Smith was going to be sentenced in New Mexico until she saw it online after.
She was a human at the end of the day, and she did the same job y'all do. And I wish y'all cared a little bit more, just as y'all care for Mr. Justin that lost his life as well.
Fore feels like more investigating still needs to be done into who was involved besides Smith, the motive, and if it was planned or not. She says she's glad Justin Hare's family can find some sort of peace knowing he'll be in prison for the rest of his life. She says she wants the same for her mom while she deals with the grief and loss at such a young age, trying to keep her mom's name alive.
Nobody cares like I do. And I can't do anything, nothing, but talk and talk and talk and try to get her name out there, try to let people know that my baby she was still a human at the end of the day, and they took her from me in the worst way possible. I left her abandoned to rot. How can somebody do that to another human being?
Fore says while she's not here physically, she knows her mom is still with her every day guiding her and finds peace knowing she's happy somewhere else.
Lord knows she would be so proud of me right now. But she's with me.
Justin Hare's case ended with a guilty plea and a life sentence. Phonesia Machado-Fore's case entered a different legal path, one that is still unfinished. South Carolina authorities obtained 17 state warrants against Jaremy Smith. Murder, kidnapping, carjacking, 2 counts of first-degree burglary, 2 counts of possessing a weapon during a violent crime, 7 counts of possessing a firearm as a convicted felon, 2 counts of motor vehicle grand larceny, and criminal conspiracy. Then, in February 2026, the federal case expanded. A superseding indictment charged Smith with kidnapping resulting in death, carjacking resulting in death, using a firearm during a violent crime in a manner constituting murder, possessing stolen firearms, and possessing firearms as a convicted felon. Federal prosecutors also announced that they intend to seek the death penalty on the eligible charges connected to Phonesia's kidnapping and killing. Smith appeared in federal court on February 26, 2026, and pleaded not guilty. That distinction is important. Smith has admitted guilt and been sentenced for the federal crimes connected to Justin's death. But the charges involving Phonesia remain allegations unless and until they are proved in court. As of July 21, 2026, the publicly available record reviewed for this story does not show that the South Carolina federal capital case has reached trial. And while the legal process continues, Phonesia's family is living with what no verdict can restore. Faith entered adulthood without the mother she said was supposed to guide her. Phonesia never saw her graduate. Roxy is raising her children in Minnesota without the grandmother who had already begun preparing to move closer to them. Tyrone is left to honor the promise he and Phonesia made. Whichever parent remained would continue caring for their daughters. In New Mexico, Dizer Quintana gave birth to Justin's third daughter months after his death. 3 girls will grow up knowing their father died after stopping to help a man stranded beside the road. Phonesia and Justin lived more than 1,500 miles apart. They apparently never met. Yet both were public servants, and both families were changed by the same chain of violence. Phonesia Machado-Fore spent her life answering calls for help. Justin Hare died because he answered one. For now, Phonesia's family is still waiting for justice. Share this story so their names are remembered for the lives they lived, not only for the man accused and convicted of taking them. Subscribe to Dark Trace Crime Stories, and tell us in the comments, what should justice ultimately look like in Phonesia's case?